Hi, so this presentation is going to be talking about the IB Diploma's English A Language and Literature Paper 1 test. It's pretty similar to the literature test. I'm going to go through and give you a few tips and ideas about what to look for and then how to structure an answer to make sure you get a really good grade. So to kick off with then, this is the text we're going to be looking at. If you want to pause for a moment, you can read through this and I'll carry on. It's the second page. And then it finishes with some explanations, some footnotes, and a couple of questions for standard level, some guiding questions that often give you a bit of a clue. This is the mark scheme. This is for the new course that started teaching in 2019, but it's pretty similar to the old one. The first one looks at a general overview of the understanding. Do you understand the text in general terms? Can you also look at larger implications, things like the context, any other connotations there may be, all the time using good references. Criterion B looks at the close analysis that you can do. You can zoom in here and pick out particular features. Think about the context of composition, what the author was thinking about, why they use certain types of language. Organisation, is your presentation, is your essay well organised and focused? And language, is it clear, effective, and basically polished? Okay, so that's the mark scheme that we're looking at. Now, with any question, however you choose to answer, there's a couple of good techniques to begin with. Firstly, look at the guiding questions. They often give you a clue about what the text is about, and then especially look at the source, look where it came from. Usually this is at the end of the extract. It can give you some really good clues. Here you see the author is a soldier, it's not a writer, not a professional writer, writing to his wife, so you've got the text type, it's a letter, you've got the audience there, and you've got some context from the front during a battle in Belgium. In 1917, 1915 when it was written, you should be aware, you should know from your general knowledge, that's World War I. So there's quite a lot of information there you can gather. It also shows you there's a secondary audience. The first audience is the wife. We'll look at how that affects how he writes in a while. But also there's a secondary audience here for the temporary heroes. Assume it's a collection of World War I letters. So that gives you a slightly different type of audience. Okay, so I'm going to go through this kind of section by section. This is one way that you can do it. And there's several things I'm going to be looking at. There's a technique called the Big Five, and I'm going to be referencing those 5 features as we go through, so I'm still going to be mentioning them, but I'm going to be doing it while looking at each section of the actual text. So at the beginning, the opening section, it starts off like a pretty standard letter. Dear Phyllis, apologises for not writing earlier, so nothing too exceptional there. Quite formal, quite informal beginning. The tone seems quite upbeat, possibly even naive. We had a thrilling march. Assuming thrilling has a similar meaning to what it does now, it seems an unusual type of word to be using here. But at the end of the sentence, there's a certain kind of fatalistic irony here. All the more thrilling by the probability of having to make an attack. Immediately signals that there is a dangerous element to this and a kind of more ominous tone. The purpose seems to be, in general, though, to reflect the mood of what's happening here, to give the wife some understanding, but possibly not exposing her to absolutely everything that's happening, and hence the use of words like thrilling. There is certainly a tonal shift. There is certainly some realism in this, realistic features, where we see the ambulances go in empty and they come out full. So there's a kind of parallelism in the way this is written, and it's quite a sudden jolt as we read, and we understand that this is quite a serious situation that he's in. Moving on, he moves on chronologically. The structure of the piece is kind of recounting like a diary almost of what happened. It talks about the people singing and the soldiers singing. Again, this kind of fatalistic, whatever will happen, they're going to be upbeat about it, and he seems to be part of this group. Worth pointing out here, the group is full of not necessarily experienced veteran soldiers, but businessmen, students, labourers, regular people who have signed up to fight for their country here. So it gives you an idea about the type of people he's with. The tone does seem quite fatalistic. Singing seems like a lot of them may be killed, but they put on a brave face. Maybe he's also putting on a brave face for his wife, who he's writing to here. The tone it's fatalistic. There's also there's a slightly kind of humorous, informal feel to it. We entered Wipers because Eeps, I guess, is difficult to pronounce for the British, so they called it Wipers, for example. But he does describe the effect of war here, the crumbling brick, the cathedral that's collapsed and things like that. And then moving on into the next section, we actually see the combat that happens. And we can see here the tone, there's a tonal shift, much more somber, much more graphic. We can see the problems that they have. The Germans are attacking heavily, and they reply with one round of shrapnel. A dud is something that doesn't actually explode, so pretty useless. And he kind of blames somebody else for that. Still maintains some humour, even in when your creepy work running against dead bodies is definitely a much more sombre tone to describe. But again, there's that sort of dark humour and a reminder that he's not really a soldier when he realises he hasn't actually pulled the pins out of the grenade. And then as we move on structurally, the ending again returns to what we'd kind of expect from a letter. It's looking forward to the future rather than just explaining what's happened. There's a lists 5 possible things that could happen, and then a kind of resigned. Again, there's a fine selection for you. None of these options particularly sound fantastic for him. And this interesting phrase here, this kind of paradox almost: take your choice, and it's certain to be untrue. This maybe hints at the madness of war, the confusion of war, and certainly changes the tone to a more philosophical feeling. And the end here, the alliterative phrase "tired Thomas" again brings it back to an informal, comforting tone to leave the wife with, a cheery thought as he's tried to explain what's happening. Also, if we look at the secondary reader in 1917, we're also wondering possibly if Thomas survived. We don't know from this extract if he actually survived the war and made it back to his wife. And that mystery, that unanswered question, also maybe gives a more haunting, mysterious tone to the piece. Okay, so there we go. There's an idea of how you can work your way through section by section, picking out certain pieces. I hope that is useful.